prediction, crash, and also possibly a shutdown of the stock market on March 13th, 2026. The date that this video is posted proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email and forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. This email, or also this video, is documenting the prediction that the US stock market will crash on Friday, March 13th, 2026. Specifically this date. It'll be a black swan financial event, which is an unexpected, shocking event. It is predicted that also this will be the initial shocking event, the initial shock to what will become the biggest stock market crash in history. It is also predicted, or also I should say speculated, it's not necessary for this prediction, but it's also speculated that on March 13th, trading will be temporarily halted. The loss in the S&P 500 stock index on March 13th is speculated to be large enough to trigger a circuit breaker that temporarily shuts down trading. Trading is halted when the S&P 500 index loses 7%, 13%, and 20% in one trading day. In other words, the S&P 500 index is speculated to lose on this March 13th date 7% or possibly 13% or 20%. And again, the post date of this video and this email and forensic notes PDF document is documenting that this prediction is being made ahead of time. This knowledge of this prediction for March 13th, 2026 has been known since early or late February. Late February. Well, the date here is March 7th in this email, but this was known a week or two even before this. All right, welcome. This video is documenting this prediction that there will be a crash in the stock market on Wall Street on March 13th, 2026. Not only this, though, this will be a significant crash. In other words, this will be the story of the day, the news story of the day. It will be what may be termed a black swan event. There have been a number of these black swan events in history. The most famous may be the Black Monday stock market crash, when in one day the Dow Jones lost a record percentage of points in one day, 23%. So that's an example of a black swan financial stock market event. That's what's being predicted for March 13th, 2026. It's also speculated that there will be a temporary shutdown of the market. In other words, the market has designed it that after the Black Monday crash in 1987, they instituted they implemented these circuit breakers where if the stock market loses 7% in one day, the stock market shuts down, trading is halted for 15 minutes. This is repeated again if the market loses 13% in one day. So the first halting of trading occurs after 7% is lost in the same day. Then again, the market is halted for 15 minutes if the stock market loses 13% in one day. And then if the stock market loses 20% in one day, the stock market is halted, trading is halted on the stock market for the remainder of the day. unless the 20% loss occurs, I think, within the last 30 minutes of trading in the day. But it is speculated, as what is being speculated is that there will be a shutdown, whether it's after 7 or 13 or 20%, or perhaps all three. But this is speculated to occur on March 13th, 2026. All right, so let's recap here. There's a prediction for a crash on March 13th, 2026. But what's the big deal about that? There are periodically significant declines in a stock market during a day. What I'm saying is this won't be a typical decline. This will be a massive decline. The number one news story of the day will be this decline. It won't be a sub-story. It won't be an interesting story. It will be the top story of this day. And I'm not predicting it for any date. I'm specifically saying March 13th. So that makes this prediction quite something. That in itself. In addition to that, I'm speculating, I could even say I'm predicting, that the market will shut down. And I have good reason to think that this is likely. And I'll explain that later in this video. When that occurs, this will make this prediction that much more, if you will, interesting. Not only this, though, I'm not only predicting that there will be this black swan event. By the way, the meaning of a black swan event is a sudden and unexpected event that people do not recognize ahead of time will happen, but typically in hindsight, it's explained logically. But what I'm predicting is I'm saying that I know this is recognized in advance. And that's because this prediction is from God. All right? And the reason why you should know that this is from God is because I'm predicting a precise date for this. And the date that I am making this video right now is March 7th, Saturday, March 7th. March 13th has been known to be a black swan date for a week or two prior to March 7th. But this video and this email here document March 7th. Okay, so if the market starts declining a lot on Monday, March 9th, or Tuesday, March 10th, and it looks like, you know, the market could end up crashing on the 13th, please know, be aware that this prediction is being made before any such preliminary decline on perhaps the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. March 13th is a Friday. So if there ends up being a significant decline on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, that indicates that a crash might be coming, this prediction is being made before that. Let's be clear about that. That makes this prediction a prediction, or more of a prediction. Because there are, of course, those that believe that sometime in the near future, there's a certain small percentage, a very small percent of people, or if you will, investors or traders, are calling for a crash. Some might be calling for a pullback, which is much different than a crash. Some might even be calling for a recession, which is different than a crash. Well, crashes can be a part of a recession. So that brings me to my next point. Not only am I predicting a crash, a one-day specific huge crash in one day, specifically on March 13th, I'm also predicting that this crash, this black swan event, will be the unexpected, sudden kickoff event to the biggest crash in all of history. Now that is going to take some time for this prediction to be recognized because the market is not expected to crash, of course, in one day, let alone in 1 month. But by the end, however long it takes, which I don't think will take very long, this will end up being the biggest crash in all of history. And what I mean by not being very long, well, the crash in 1929 finally bottomed in 1932, I believe. If I'm wrong, it's 33. But anyway, it took a couple of years. I don't expect it to take a couple of years, but it could. Anyway, I'm predicting that this will be the beginning of the biggest crash in all of history. And so, when this one-day crash occurs on March 13th, 2026, as predicted, it will prove, beyond a doubt, that this prediction is from God. Now, it being the beginning of the biggest crash in all of history makes this, because yes, there are some people that are calling for a crash in the near future, but they're not predicting a precise date for a kickoff event, if you will, of a black swan event, which will include a potential shutdown of the market. No one is predicting that for a specific date. Okay, but if you are a hardcore fundamentalist, agnostic, atheist religionist, and this isn't enough for you, predicting a massive one-day crash on a specific date. If that isn't enough for you, including a shutdown of the market, if by chance that isn't enough for you because you are a stubborn, hardcore agnostic atheist, which, let's be honest, all of them are. All agnostic atheists are stubborn and hardcore religionists, fundamentalists. And I'll explain that in a second. But if you are, in other words, I don't even need to preface it with the adjective hardcore. If you are an agnostic atheist, which by definition is a hardcore fundamentalist religionist, and this isn't enough for you to predict a one-day crash in the market in which potentially the market shuts down temporarily, if that's not enough for you, and if by chance you weighed out this prediction and you see that this ends up being the biggest crash in all of history, if that still isn't enough for you, then the reasons that I know this in advance, which will be explained in this video, will prove this to you. And this is the purpose of this prediction. It is to prove the reasons, and the reasons, vice versa, prove the prediction. As you will see clearly, these reasons could not have been concocted in the imagination of a human being. No one is creative enough to come up with these reasons for this crash that's predicted for March 13th. You will clearly see this in this video. Stay tuned. But if even that isn't enough for you, then you are a fool. I'll be honest with you, you already are a fool for being an agnostic atheist. That is foolish. And I don't mean to offend. I'm speaking my mind. It is the truth. Because the evidence for the righteous Christian God of the Bible is everywhere. And it is overwhelming. But you choose to ignore it because you are a fool. And I am trying to help you with this video. And this prediction that is from God. And the reasons will prove that this prediction is not from me, it is from God. And so let's get to it. Let's start explaining these reasons. First, before we begin, let me clarify what I mean by agnostic atheism being a religion. It isn't a neutral or non-religious worldview. Every worldview is a religion, and every worldview or religion has a core belief on which all of the other beliefs rest. The core belief, for example, of Christianity is that Christ is God. Okay, the core belief of the Eastern Hindu religion or the New Age religion is that God is the universe itself and people are part of that God and they just have forgotten in a cosmic play, and the goal is to wake up and remember that you were God all along, so-called enlightenment. That's the core belief, right? That God is the universe itself, as opposed to monotheism, which says that God isn't the universe itself, but is holy, which is the Hebrew word for separate from the creation, and is the creator of the creation. It isn't, and he isn't the creation itself. He isn't an impersonal energy or a collective consciousness. He is a personal being. Okay, well, the core belief of the agnostic atheist religion is that there may or may not be a God, but it is impossible to know because there is no evidence for God. That is the core belief of the agnostic atheist religion and worldview. And it is like a religion. It is a religion. And it has its priests and everything like it, like a religion. And this core belief, of course, is the biggest lie in history. And the truth is that this reluctance to emerge from late 18th and early 19th century so-called science and the materialism worldview, when it was learned that, for example, geology and the lines in the rocks could be explained by something other than Noah's flood, that kind of primitive worldview compared to what we have today, with the science overwhelmingly confirming that there is an intelligent designer. Even early 20th century science overwhelmingly contradicts this materialism worldview. Okay, so anyway, what I'm trying to say is that the culture is stuck as a whole. The Western culture is stuck in this really, really outdated worldview of materialism, and what I mean by outdated is not up to date with the science, but yet they think arrogantly that because there is no proof for God with science, so they think that therefore they are the reasoned, more enlightened view, but it couldn't be further from the truth. And the truth is that the reason for the reluctance to emerge from this early 19th century mentality or worldview is that they don't want there to be a God. That's the truth. They do not want there to be a righteous God that they're accountable to for their sin. They do not like that idea. And if anything, they would prefer, if there is a God, for this God to be an impersonal energy that they are a part of because of their pride, which incidentally is the root of sin in the Bible. The most prideful thing of all, the most egoistic thing, is the religion that claims to be anti-ego, the Eastern religion, which claims that we are, as individuals, God. And so that's more palatable, and that's why the Hindu religion has replaced Christianity in the West. Because when polled, only around 13% of the people in the West today are actually atheists. If they are asked if do they believe in a God, the majority will say yes, but not like the God of the Bible. And what they mean is that they haven't really thought about it very much, but they've heard a thing or two about these Eastern concepts and they like that, basically. And the reason why they like that is because it's much more palatable for the self-obsessed modern Western individual. Okay? So, there's also something in psychology called belief perseverance. which shows that when confronted with information that contradicts a person's worldview, the person blocks the information out. It goes in one ear and out the other. It does not register. They don't think about the contradictory information 5 minutes after hearing it. Why is that? Why is there belief perseverance? Well, the reason is because to change one's worldview is extremely uncomfortable. Why is that? To change one's worldview is equivalent to changing one's self, because we are our worldview. We are what we believe. It is the core of our being. It is who we are as a being, our worldview. Everything we do, everything about us is founded in a worldview. It's how our brain approaches life. It's who we are. And to change that requires an enormous amount of humility, which incidentally is the Christian worldview. Humility being the opposite of pride, the root of sin in the Bible. And nothing is more requiring of humility than changing one's worldview to Christianity, the Christian religion that requires humility and an acknowledgement of one's shortcomings and their sin, and an acknowledgement to a righteous Christian God that they're accountable to. That's essentially the most unpalatable thing for most people, which is why the hatred and bigotry and persecution of Christians unlike any other religion on earth. But this test or choice, if you will, of humility is the purpose of life. The reason how we are created in God's image, as it is said, is because we have been given free will. The free will to choose whether or not we want to be with the righteous Christian God of the Bible forever or not. And most do not want that. And fair enough. But God, if he desired to create a creature that he could have a relationship with, would not stand in front of the creature and say, hey, welcome to life, love me, or else. That would be forced or ingenuine, insincere love. And no one would want to marry someone who they are forced to love, or let alone marry a robot. And neither is this the case with God. And so that's why we have been given free will to choose God, the righteous Christian God of the Bible, or not, and to go our own way. Independence from God being the original sin. All right, so let's begin documenting these reasons, some of them, for how it is known ahead of time that the stock market will crash in a black swan event, which will include a likely shutdown temporarily, a halting of trading on March 13th, 2026. This email is documenting the prediction that the U.S. stock market will crash on Friday, March 13th, 2026. It will be a black swan financial event. It is predicted that on March 13th, trading will be temporarily halted. The loss in the S&P 500 stock index on March 13th is predicted to be large enough to trigger the circuit breaker that temporarily shuts down trading. Trading is halted when the S&P 500 index loses 7%, 13%, and 20% in one trading day. Each time these levels are hit, trading halts. When it hits the 20% level, trading halts for the rest of the day, unless the 20% is reached within the last half hour or so, I forget exactly, of the remainder of the trading day. In other words, the S&P 500 index is predicted to lose at least 7% or possibly 13 or 20% on March 13th. This isn't the absolute prediction here. I'm predicting there'll be a black swan event. I'm also predicting or speculating that the trading will shut down. But that's not necessarily, it's not necessary for that to happen for this prediction. The market could lose 6% in the day and it's still a black swan event. All right, like I'm saying, it'll be the top news story of the day. Well, that's not even necessary, actually. There may be, in fact, some event politically or geopolitically or internationally or something that might trigger this, although I do not expect that. I do not expect that. I'm not in any way predicting that some sort of event will cause the stock market to lose. No. To explain that would be to explain what I believe to be true, which is socionomics, which is that the stock market is not a reaction to what people claim to be as cause and effect, fundamentals, things that cause the market to do this or that. The truth is that the market price action is a function of waves of social mood. But all of that aside, it does not matter. I didn't need to go into that detail. All I'm saying is that I'm predicting that the stock market will have a massive loss on this day. It'll be a black swan event. It'll be at least a top news story of the day. And it will possibly include a halting of trading at some point. Okay. The name Jesus in Greek, the language of the New Testament, is equal to 888 in Greek gematria. Like Roman numerals, like Roman letters that are also numbers, Greek letters are also numbers. In Bible prophecy, the number associated with the Antichrist is 666. The predicted stock market crash on March 13th, 2026 will be exactly 888 weeks after March 6th, 2009, when the S&P 500 index bottomed at 666 points at the bottom or after the 2008-2009 stock market crash. This was a massive crash at the time, in 2008. The blame was on the housing bubble, but again, it's all nonsense because socionomics is true. The Elliott wave principle is true. All of this is a function of mass social psychology, which in fact is patterned and comes in waves. Anyway, that's another subject. But the point is that the very bottom tick, at the very bottom of this significant crash, was exactly 666 points. Even the mainstream media noted this. The mainstream media, news media, the financial news media, ran stories, articles, headlines with this, that the bottom of the S&P after this epic crash was 666 points. Now, they don't even really know what that even means, but They know it's biblical. They know it's from the Bible. Everyone knows this, right? So, anyway, this was a news story at the time, even in the mainstream media. Anyway, from this date, which, by the way, was on the date 3/6, March 6th, which hints at in itself 3 6s, 666. From this 666 sign that identified the Antichrist, because it was just after the Antichrist was inaugurated in 2009, in January. In fact, it was the 9th triangular number of days from the inauguration to this low in the stock market in 2009. Okay, and the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy is 666. And the number 9 is the most important number in God's signs, as from the Bible it symbolizes God's judgment. The judgment on America is the Antichrist, Barack Obama. And, okay, even before I was a born-again Christian, and before Obama was elected, or rather I should say, at the time that he was elected, I knew at that time, as a secular person, that he was the last president. He would be the last president. I knew that at the time, because there's a saying which is true: a people deserve the government they get. And with the election of Obama and the leftist media doing nothing to vet this bad guy, which was apparent to many wise people, wise conservatives, I knew, I don't know about, I can't speak for all conservatives, but I knew, and I didn't hear this from any other conservative, incidentally, at the time, but I knew that he was the last president. I mean, America no longer deserved democracy with the election of Barack Obama. That was clear. And furthermore, we know the nature of the left, and it is undemocratic. That's their nature. Okay? And the thing that communists and socialists and leftists do is funny. They accuse their enemy and their opponents of doing the very things they do and are. So, for example, in the last election cycle, they constantly were talking how they were out to save democracy, when in fact they were the ones that were destroying and have been destroying and are equal to the end of democracy. It's the left. All right, and so I knew at the time. Now, I was very surprised when Trump was elected. I couldn't believe it. I thought, wait a second, Barack Obama is the last president. Because just prior to Trump's election, I had become, about a year and a half or so before his election and inauguration, I had become actually it was literally about a year. Anyway, I had become a born-again Christian, and I was highly interested in Bible prophecy at that time, and I did know that I already knew that Barack Obama was the last president, and so therefore by that time I knew that Barack Obama was the Antichrist. And so I was quite surprised to see Trump in office, but it didn't take too long to figure out that Trump is in fact a trumpet trumpeting the Antichrist, and that Barack Obama will become the president again in 2029. All right, so now the Antichrist, and by the way, I should mention something. The reason for this prediction that is from God, that this video is explaining, is to prove the controversial things that I am saying in this video. It isn't only for predicting, or rather for proving, that the righteous Christian God of the Bible is the true God. There's already an overwhelming amount of evidence for that. This prediction in this video that is from God is to prove the controversial things that I am saying. And I know far far better than you or anyone the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God, and the purpose of this video and video channel. Make no mistake, I know more than you the purpose of this prediction. I don't know how many times I need to say it to make it very clear, because I don't think people understand when I say it one time. I know more than you the reason for this prediction, and it is not for you to go, oh, cool, neat. You were able to know this ahead of time. That's quite amazing. No, that is not the purpose for this prediction. That is from God. And that is not the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction. The reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove the controversial things that I am saying in this video. There is no debate. Zero. End of discussion. Barack Obama is the second of the two antichrists described in Bible prophecy. And so, if you are an evangelical that loves to play the antichrist guessing game, it's time to stop. Or, ignore what I'm saying and turn off the video, because you are wasting your time. And so go ahead and waste more time playing the antichrist guessing game. But it is absurd, and it is absurd to even think that God would not reveal the identity of the Antichrist. And the reason why you believe this is because of your false, heretical salvation doctrine, which has you falsely interpret 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. And identifying the what and the he that Paul was talking about as the Holy Spirit. Because of your necessity, the requirement that you do so in order to maintain your salvation doctrine, which is the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day, that Jesus said he hates and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine. Very quickly, the he and the what. Why would Paul refer to the Holy Spirit as a he and a what? And why would he speak cryptically and also tell the Thessalonians in the same letter that they knew what he was talking about? Why didn't he just speak plainly, especially since they knew? The reason is, of course, because anyone in possession of Paul's letter would have been in great danger had he been speaking plainly. Because when he was referring to the he and the what, he was referring, in terms of the what, the capital of Rome being moved by the he, Emperor Constantine, to Constantinople, thus paving the way, or rather clearing the way, for the rise of power of the bishops of Rome. And it is an absolute shame. It is shameful that evangelicals don't know that the Pope is the first of the two antichrists. Absolutely shameful to profess to be interested in Bible prophecy and to not know this. Because it is so very clear, including from Old Testament prophecy. But this knowledge, which there wouldn't have been a Protestant Reformation had there not been for this knowledge, has been conveniently lost in the last 50 years or so, partly because of this salvation doctrine that has been rising in popularity over the last 50 years. Yeah. And so this knowledge has been lost conveniently right before the Pope becomes the Antichrist, in order to fool as many people as possible, including Protestants. And so, anyway, I just wanted to get that out of the way. The controversial things that I am saying are a fact when this prediction comes to pass. And incidentally, that is the purpose of prophecy, which is what God's signs are and what this video is. God is prophesying through his signs, and I'm just relaying the message to you. but I have the authority to tell you what the message is when the prediction comes to pass. That's how prophecy works. It serves to prove the matter. And I'm telling you, I know what the matter is for this prophecy and why the purpose of the prophecy and what it is proving. It is proving that God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, is true. And God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections overwhelmingly demonstrates these facts, these truths. Like an overwhelming majority of God's signs, which the vast majority of people that claim to be watchers of signs miss, is about the identifying the two antichrists, especially Barack Obama. I mean, identifying Barack Obama as the Antichrist is in fact, building blocks of the God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. And I just gave you one example, the bottom of the stock market crash with the 666 number right after his inauguration. Okay, that's just one example of like thousands, literally, of examples that have been missed by not only people that aren't watching, but also quote-unquote watchers, unfortunately. So anyway, it'll be great when this prediction comes to pass because people can then go back into these videos on this channel and start to learn about these things that God has been communicating for years that hasn't gotten out to the wider community here. And so it's about time that people know how God's big picture of signs works, including the building blocks of his signs, which is identifying Barack Obama. Okay? Now, and by the way, also on that note, Jesus commanded for his disciples to watch for the signs of his return, for the prophetic signs. It's not a voluntary thing. It's not a thing to choose whether you're not to be interested or not. This is a mandatory thing. He commanded this over and over, repeatedly. A few times he commanded his followers to watch for the signs. And, by the way, 1/3 of the Bible is prophecy for the purpose of God proving that it is the inspired word of God. And the disciples recognized that Jesus was the Messiah through his fulfillment of prophecy. Revelation 19:10, the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. And so it is actually also a shame that the vast majority of quote-unquote Christians, including evangelicals, are not interested in prophecy, because the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. Christianity is a prophetic tradition. And what is happening right now is the same thing that happened before the first coming. The wise men were those who were watching. How did they know the timing of the Messiah? Through watching. They watched, and how did they know when to watch and what to watch? Through Bible prophecy. Daniel chapter 9 is how the Jews that were in Babylon at the time recognized their Jewish king through that prophecy, and that's how they ended up following the Star of Bethlehem and finding Jesus. Okay, so the Antichrist is described in the book of Revelation, chapter 13. The Antichrist is Pope Francis, the first of the two Antichrists. And he was elected as Pope on the date 313 in the year 13. By the way, the reason for that is because Rome converted to Catholicism in 313 AD. And when it did so, it did not do away with its ancient pagan religion and traditions. It just repackaged them into a wrapper that made it look like Christianity. Which is why, incidentally, Peter in the Bible referred to Rome as Babylon. And, of course, Peter was never in Rome, contrary to what Catholics will say, in order to propagandize their pagan religion that is a mixture of Christianity and paganism, which incidentally is the thing that God hates the most. The Jews were constantly being chastised for mixing their true religion with the pagan religion of their neighbors, and ultimately they were exiled to Babylon, the home of pagan religion, for this. And that's what Catholicism is. It's exactly what the Jews were doing. They were mixing pagan religion with Christianity. And when you do that, it is no longer Christianity. Catholicism is not a legitimate denomination of Christianity. It isn't. It is not a legitimate denomination of Christianity. I'll repeat that. That said, I don't hate Catholics, okay? So if you're a Catholic, please don't get offended. I'm just speaking truth. And neither do I believe, nor should it matter what I believe, but neither do I believe that God hates Catholics. And neither do I believe that Catholics won't be saved. But if they will be, it'll be in spite of their Catholicism, not because of it. But that said, the majority of Catholics are in danger, as are the majority of Protestants, but for a different reason. Both are deceived, just in their unique ways. I mean, Satan has a deception for everyone, including Protestants. Don't get me wrong, I'm not pro-Protestant. I'm not pro-Luther or something. I'm just saying what it is. I mean, I'll say it to the Islamists' face too. I mean, Islam is of the devil. Okay, Islam is of the devil, Jehovah's Witnesses of the devil, and so is Catholicism. And so is the doctrine that fools evangelicals and Protestants. Okay, Satan has this wicked deception for everyone. All right. But when the Bible says, "Come out of her, my people," and talks about Mystery Babylon, he's talking about Rome and Roman Catholicism. I mean, for anyone with a little bit of wisdom, anyone with some wisdom should know that for 2,000 years, the Antichrist was going to be a pope. And you don't even need Bible prophecy to know that. But Bible prophecy is overwhelmingly clear. It's very straightforward, which is why I said earlier it's shameful that Protestants have lost this. Now, because it was at one point widely, conventional knowledge in non-Catholic circles. There are a couple of denominations that still understand this, like the Seventh-day Adventists, but the evangelical church has really lost the plot when it comes to that. Now, the predicted stock market crash on March 13th, 2026. By the way, 26 is 13 plus 13. The date 313, and again, the Antichrist was elected Pope on the date 313 in the year 13. But then exactly 13 years later is this year that is 13 plus 13. Okay? And so that'll be the day of the predicted stock market crash. Okay? It'll be 13 years exactly after 313 when Pope Francis was elected in the year 13. The second of two antichrists described in the book of Revelation chapter 13 is Barack Obama, who was the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 in high school basketball. The date 313 hints at 3 divided by 13, which is equal to 0.230. And there aren't any other dates where you can divide the two numbers of the date together and get a number that has a 0 as the third number, in order to further highlight the first two numbers, which in this case is 23. There's lots more to be said about how God has used this date 313 before, specifically in 2022, to point to Barack Obama, but that's a whole other story. Now, anyway, in the Bible, and by the way, this is how I know these things, right? I've been studying his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections from morning until night for more than 8 years. And so this knowledge has been accruing over time. And so it's very quick that I can recognize these things these days. Anyway, in the Bible, the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. 23 is the 9th prime number, and the bottom of the stock market crash at 666 points in 2009 was the 9th triangular number of days after basketball player number 23's inauguration as the president in 2009. And again, the number 9 is the most important number, as from the Bible, it symbolizes God's judgment. If you're wondering what a triangular number is, in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 9th row is 45. And so the distance between the stock market low and his inauguration was 45 days, the 9th triangular number. Pope Francis died at the age of 88, and he was elected on the date 3/13. His prophetic funeral was attended by Trump, whose name, Trump, is equal to 88 in simple English gematria. A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3. And the prophetic funeral in which Trump attended of Pope Francis, who died at 88 and was elected on the date 3/13, Trump, 88, was at the funeral 3 months and 13 days before the date 8/8 and the release of the movie Freakier Friday. All right, so I think this is pretty straightforward, but I'll just repeat it anyway to make this very clear. We have a pattern here. Clearly, the Pope died at the age of 88, and he was elected on the date 3/13, which, as I explained earlier in this video, if I'm cutting this video into different parts, I'll repeat that. The reason why he was elected on the date 3/13 is because Rome converted to Catholicism on the date 3/13, or rather 313 AD. And that's significant because Rome, when it converted to Catholicism, didn't do away with its pagan religion. It just repackaged it to make it appear like Christianity. I mean, there's countless examples, anecdotes of this. But for one thing, the worship of Mary is a continuation of the worship of the fertility goddess, which was depicted in ancient art the same as the Madonna, Mother Mary with the baby Jesus in her arms. Exact same image of the fertility goddess and sun in Ishtar, Aphrodite, Isis. Okay. And anyway, so that's just like that's just one example of the pagan religion carried over in 313 AD. It's significant and it's prophetic. And like I said earlier, anyone with any wisdom will recognize that a pope, that it was always going to be a pope that would be the Antichrist from the very beginning. Not the very beginning, not the first century, but since the rise of Rome, or rather Roman Catholicism. Anyway, that's explained too many other times in other videos. But so it's very significant, this 313 date in God's signs. And incidentally, once again, this crash we are talking about will be on a Friday on the date 313 this year, Friday the 13th. And it'll be exactly, once again, 13 years after this 313 date when the Antichrist was elected the Pope, or when the Pope was elected and he is the Antichrist. So, okay, he died at 88. Now, Trump is Mr. 88 because the word Trump in archaic English means the sounding of a trumpet or a trumpet. And so Trump is God's trumpet, trumpeting prophetic signs. And so God's trumpet, attended the funeral for the Antichrist, who died at 88, and Trump is equal to 88. That's a confirmation of the significance of trumpet attending the funeral of the Antichrist. That in itself, right? There's more to that prophetic sign of his attendance at the funeral when he met with, for example, Zelensky, but that's another story. Well, no, it isn't actually, because that's the second of the two Antichrists. So the two Antichrists were identified with this prophetic funeral because Zelensky is Mr. Number 44. Why is that? Well, when the war started, it started just literally a few days after he turned 44 years old. And at the time, Ukraine was made up of 44 million people before the Exodus, as in the Bible Exodus. And throughout the first prophetic year of this war, when Zelensky was making the rounds on the international stage, including at the UN, for example, he was 44 years old. And all of this was a prophetic sign hinting at the 44th president Antichrist on the world stage, including at the UN. Also, Zelensky is the first, and God uses firsts for prophetic signs, he was the first, or is the first Jewish leader of Ukraine, which hints at the first black president, the 44th president, who will persecute Jews, including in Israel. Okay, so now that I've established more on this prophetic funeral, we have again Trump, 88, at the 88-year-old's funeral. All right, and again, he was elected on the date 3/13. And what we have here is that from the funeral, it is 3 months and 13 days to the date 8/8, which obviously hints at 88 and Trump and the age of the Antichrist's death. And on this day, this 8/8 date, was the release of the movie Freakier Friday, which was released on a Friday. Now, in the book of Genesis, the flood began on the date 2/17. On 9/11, two planes crashed the towers 17 minutes apart. And two space shuttle disasters, or rather two space shuttles crashed, or I should say the two space shuttle crashes were exactly 17 years apart, or almost exactly. They are commemorated on the same date every year because they were just a couple of days off in the calendar year, so they were essentially exactly 17 years apart. Okay, and there's reasons for that, and that in turn hints at Apollo 17, the last time that an American was on the moon. The moon is a giant rock. In the Bible, rock symbolizes Jesus. The departure of the last American from the moon was symbolic of America's departure from Christ. And what was being pointed to with the two planes 17 minutes apart. But it also hints at the timing of the flood, which was incidentally a sudden and unexpected event. And what we are predicting in this video is a sudden, unexpected black swan event, which will be a crash, which is why the planes crashed 17 minutes apart. The two of them crashed, and the space shuttles crashed 17 years apart. Now, the release of Freakier Friday on 8/8 in 2025 is 217 days before the predicted crash on Wall Street. And I should have said in this paragraph or this sentence that the two planes crashed into the towers 17 minutes apart next to Wall Street. Okay, so 217 days is this connection from this 8/8 Freakier Friday to the predicted crash on Wall Street on Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th is an 80s, as in 1980s, slasher horror movie franchise that is compared with another 80s slasher horror movie franchise, Halloween. These two 80s movies horror slasher franchises hints at 88. So again, from the date 8/8 and the release of Freakier Friday, we have this 217 days connection to a Friday on Wall Street, Friday the 13th, which gives us another 2 8s because of the two big slasher horror movie franchises from the 80s, Friday the 13th and Halloween. Jamie Lee Curtis the star of Freakier Friday and Halloween, was born exactly 800 months before the release of Freakier Friday on the date 8/8. I should have included that there. Okay, that's 3 8s. And actually, on that note, God repeats a number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. And the number 8 is symbolic of a new beginning, which is why in the flood account, 8 people were rescued on Noah's Ark. And so that's why this really should be in this paragraph here, because again, this connection hints at the flood and Noah's Ark. Again, from the date 8/8, it is 217 months to this prediction for Wall Street on Friday the 13th. And Jamie Lee Curtis starred in Freakier Friday, which was released on the date 8/8, and was born exactly 800 months before the release of Freakier Friday on the date 8/8. And that's relevant again to the flood, which is what's being predicted, a sudden, unexpected event like the flood. And 8 people were rescued in the flood, from the flood. That's why 800 months. So in other words, let me just put it this way. Jamie Lee Curtis, the star of Freakier Friday and Halloween, was born exactly 800 months before 8/8 and the release of Freakier Friday, which is in turn 217 days before Friday the 13th, and 217 hints at the flood and the 8 people that were rescued. In other words, embedded in the 217 days is an 8, if you will, and that confirms the connection from the date 8/8, which was in turn connected with 800 months exactly to the birth of Jamie Lee Curtis. Okay, and so you could say that Jamie Lee Curtis's most recent movie, probably, if it's not, it's definitely her most recent famous movie, Freakier Friday, which could possibly have ended her career because she's getting old. It'll probably no doubt be her last famous movie, I would assume. Anyway, it's like a bookend, if you will, because her career was launched with her role in the movie Halloween. So from the beginning of her career to the end of her career. And both of these movies, if you will, have a dark element to it. But Freakier Friday, of course, is a comedy, but the subject matter, when looked at correctly, is actually dark and satanic. I'll explain. Now, Jamie Lee Curtis, so God, in other words, clearly now we can see is pointing to the movie Halloween also here. And that's again confirmed because what's being pointed to is Friday the 13th. Through this Freakier Friday connection, which stars Jamie Lee Curtis, who starred in Halloween. Again, Halloween is compared with the Friday the 13th slasher horror movie franchise. Okay. Jamie Lee Curtis was known at the time, and I guess still is, but back in the beginning of her career, she was known as the quote-unquote Scream Queen because of her roles in the Halloween movies. She was the Scream Queen. She also starred in a couple of other horror movies. So she was the Scream Queen. In 2001, Halloween... Wait a second, I skipped a sentence here. Okay, so in the Bible, the floodwaters increased for 40 days after the flood began on the date 217. Again, that's the reason for the 217 days here. Okay, so 40 days, okay? This is significant here. The floodwaters increased for 40 days after the flood began on 217. The acting career of Jamie Lee Curtis, the star of Freakier Friday, was launched with her role in the movie Halloween, and Jamie Lee Curtis was known as the Scream Queen. In 2001, Halloween was celebrated 40 days after people screamed when two planes crashed into the towers 17 minutes apart on 9/11. Do you see how that all connects together here? After the two planes crashed into the towers 17 minutes apart, Trump called into the local news TV station and inadvertently trumpeted how his tower at 40 Wall Street had become the tallest tower in Lower Manhattan. The predicted crash on Wall Street on Friday the 13th, the date 3/13, will be 217 days after the release of Freakier Friday, starring Jamie Lee Curtis, on the date 8/8, and Trump is equal to 88. So this brings Trump back into it, full circle, because this 217 days since at 9/11, which is confirmed through the fact that 217 hints at the 40 days of the flood, and Halloween was 40 days after 9/11 when the two planes struck the tower 17 minutes apart. And on that day, Trump, 88, trumpeted his tower at 40 Wall Street. And it's predicted there'll be a crash on Wall Street on Friday the 13th. But anyway, we have again back 217 days from this prediction for Friday the 13th on Wall Street to the release of Freakier Friday on the date 8/8, which hints at Trump, which again was exactly 800 days after the birth of Jamie Lee Curtis. I should say 800 months. And again, this 8/8 date was 3 months and 13 days after Trump, 88, was at the funeral for the Pope, who died at 88 and was elected on the date 3/13. Full circle here. Through Trump and 40 Wall Street, it's astounding. Through 9/11, most importantly, the big warning of God's judgment. And as I said, the release of Freakier Friday, again, was 3 months and 13 days after Trump, 88, attended the funeral of the Antichrist, who died at the age of 88. The movie Freakier Friday is about possession of human bodies by a spirit. And Curtis starred in Halloween Resurrection, one of the sequels to the Halloween movie, one of the movies in the Halloween franchise. Okay, so she starred in Freakier Friday, which is about possession of human bodies by a spirit, and Curtis starred in Halloween Resurrection. On May 2nd, 2029, Pope Francis is predicted to be resurrected from the dead by demons that will also possess the bodies of humans who take the mark of the Antichrist, or who have already taken the mark of the Antichrist. And you know what I'm talking about. And when this prediction comes to pass, it'll prove what I am saying is case closed. No debate, zero discussion, no need for an additional technology or new age of dispensation, etc. Francis, after all, quote-unquote Christians will be raptured. Enough of that, though. Francis, who was elected on the date 3/13, will be resurrected on May 2nd, 2029, 313% of a calendar year after the predicted crash on Wall Street on 3/13. In other words, the funeral of Francis connects to his resurrection. If you want me to lay that out for you, again, the funeral was 3 months, and he was elected on the date 3/13. His funeral was, and attended by Trump, 88, and he died at 88, was 3 months and 13 days to the date 8/8, when Freakier Friday was released, which connects with the profound 217 days because of 9/11 and Wall Street to the predicted crash on Friday the 13th on Wall Street, which again is in turn 313% of a year after this date 3/13 to the predicted resurrection of Francis, and Jamie Lee Curtis, who is brought into all of this, as I've explained, starred in the movie Halloween Resurrection. The anniversary of Francis's funeral on April 26th, 2029, will be 3 years, 1 month, and 13 days after the predicted stock market crash on the date 3/13. 3 years, 1 month, and 13 days hints at 3/13. The predicted crash on Friday, the 3/13, or Friday the 13th, the date 3/13, will be exactly 31 weeks, and 31 hints at 13. It's a mirror of the number 13. And 31 weeks is 217 days, which we already discussed. Okay, so the predicted crash on Friday the 13th on the date 3/13 will be exactly 31 weeks after the release of Freakier Friday on 8/8, which was 3 months and 13 days after Trump, 88, attended the funeral of Francis, who died at 88. Another confirmation here. Again, the Francis funeral connects with 3 months and 13 days, which in turn connects with 31 weeks, which hints at 13, to Friday the 13th and its predicted crash on Wall Street. Before the walls of security collapsed or crashed in God's judgment, the Israelites blew 7 trumpets and shouted or screamed. Curtis starred in 7 Halloween sequel movies over a span of 44 years. I should say Curtis, the Scream Queen, starred in 7 Halloween sequel movies over the span of 44 years. In other words, she starred in 7 Halloween sequel movies. The Scream Queen and the Israelites shouted and screamed after the 7 trumpets were blown. Now, it's interesting too, though, that the Halloween career for Curtis spanned 44 years, and the second of the 2 Antichrists is the 44th president. Did I say 42 years? I meant 44 years. 44th president. After the 2 planes crashed 17 minutes apart next to the stock market on Wall Street, where people screamed, 4 hijackers hijacked the 4th plane 4 minutes before the first plane crashed. And in the 4th plane crash, 44 people died in a 40-acre pit because the plane crashed at a 40-degree angle, and the 40-acre pit in a farm field was 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh. 40 days before Halloween, as in Scream Queen. The demons that will possess people will pass through a door, and the door is the 4th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, symbol for the door. I should say the 4th letter, okay? And they will come from the bottomless pit, which is why all of the 4 is connected to Pittsburgh and the 40-acre pit. The 44 deaths in a pit in the farm field in Pennsylvania, 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh, hints at the pioneering zombie movie, which is also hinting at demonic possession, Night of the Living Dead, that was filmed in a farm field outside of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. That's exactly what I'm saying. You got it. It's correct. 9/11 was hinting at the movie Night of the Living Dead, believe it or not. Furthermore, Revelation 9:11 is the verse that symbolizes this coming demonic possession in the Bible, in Bible prophecy, which will happen after the door is opened and unlocked with the key, and the door is the number 4. Anyway, this is also why this crash on 9/11 with the 44 deaths, etc., hints at the Antichrist 44th president in the White House that's located on 4 times 400 Pennsylvania Avenue, as in the crash in the farm field 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in a 40-acre pit in which 44 people died after it was hijacked 4 minutes before the first plane crashed and hijacked by 4 hijackers. It all points to the 44th president at 4x400 Pennsylvania Avenue, who will preside over this coming zombie pandemic, which is hinted at through all of this because it was filmed, this iconic pioneering movie that was filmed on a budget of a dime. It was the cheap budget, independent B movie that started the zombie obsession movie craze. Night of the Living Dead. It's all about being filmed in a farm field just outside of Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania. There's actually more science to confirm all of that, including the release of, okay, I'll just give you this. The name of the director, his name is Roman. What's his, I think. Yeah, his name is George Romero, which hints at Rome and the first of the 2 antichrists, and him being resurrected by demons who will then demonically possess people like zombies. George Romero, okay, and he made this movie, and he also made another documentary later, a few years ago, that was released on, I forget which date, but in October of 2016, and that movie, that documentary was called Night of the Living Stealers. Night of the Living Stealers. It was obviously a play of words on his famous Night of the Living Dead. But why would he create a documentary named Night of the Living Stealers? Well, because at one point in his career, he was paid by the Pittsburgh Steelers to film the games, and he ended up filming the most iconic play in football history, the famous prophetic from God play nicknamed the Immaculate Reception, which obviously hints at Roman Catholicism also. And anyway, long story short, that movie, the documentary, was released exactly 222 weeks before January 6th, 2021, which was a zombie event. The gates, the perimeter of security was crashed by the zombie-like people that were led by the undercover people. I'm just going to not say the correct words anymore, but you know what I'm talking about. The people, the insidious people inside the swamp state, right, who used this as a way to get at Trumpers, the leftists in the government. You know what I'm talking about. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you're a fool. And why is that? Well, I'll be easy on you. It's because you've been brainwashed into watching the left media. I could be harder on you, but let's just put it that way. So the antidote to the poison you've been taking is to stop it. Stop watching the mainstream left media, which is also controlled by these same operatives behind the scenes. Okay? So anyway, that's another subject. But 222 weeks because the mark of the Antichrist is symbolized by the number 22 in God's signs. Okay, and so people are going to be demonically possessed through the mark of the Antichrist, which is the thing, and you know what I'm talking about. All right, and so anyway, that's enough of that. I just wanted to add that in there because we have, in this paragraph, the movie Night of the Living Dead that was brought up, and Pennsylvania. And speaking of the White House, which was shoplifted, and then there was the protest over the shoplifting, we had also a very evil thing happen there too, which was the crashing of the perimeter of security, just like in the movie Night of the Living Dead, by zombie-like people who walked around like zombies, not like aggressive and, but just walked around really slowly and quietly around the inside the Capitol building that day, like zombies. Didn't really know what they were doing, just walking around dazed and confused, just like zombies. It's all a prophetic sign. And everything that I'm saying will be proven to be true when the prediction comes to pass. Do you understand? I'm not playing around here. When this prediction comes to pass, it'll prove everything that I just said. Enough is enough. Stop the left propaganda. You have been brainwashed. It's a time to wake up. I'll add a couple more things here. The truth is that you love the lies. If you don't know the truth about the sixth day of the first month in 2021, if you don't know the truth, it's because, not because you watch the left media and you've been brainwashed, but also because you love the lies. You love the lies of the left. And why is that? Because you are spiritually aligned with Satan. That's the truth. And I am trying to help you. You love the lies, and it's all spiritual. You are in rebellion against the righteous Christian God of the Bible. You are going to hell. You have and will take again the mark of the Antichrist described in Bible prophecy. You love the lies. This is spiritual truth going on here. Why do you love the lies? Because as someone on the left, you hate those who hate evil. You don't necessarily know that consciously, but that's the truth. I will also add that I know far better than you and anyone the reason and purpose for this prediction that is from God. Make no mistake, I know more than you the reason for this prediction that is from God. And it is to prove to you every single thing that I have just said. And I was only scratching the surface. I don't want to make this a political video. But I need to be clear. I know more than you the reason and purpose for this prediction. All right? And it is to prove what I have just said. That is the purpose of this prediction. It is the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction, and I know more than you the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction. Case closed. Another thing to point out here is that those who love the lies and love consuming the lies from the left media are also guilty of shoplifting the referendum. Those who love consuming the lies of the left from the left media are also guilty. They are participants. And one thing that they have participated in that is evil over the last years is the shoplifting of the referendum. And because we are speaking about a coming zombie pandemic that will be the result of taking the mark of the Antichrist, those who consumed the left media during the CVD disease days and participated, and thereby participated in the cult, the political cult of the left, a religious type political cult regarding taking the mark of the Antichrist, and you know what I'm talking about. You are also guilty of mass murder. You need to repent of these things. Another thing to add here is that this 222 weeks exact connection from the premiere, the release of this documentary, Night of the Living Stealers, to the zombie-like crashing of the security perimeter of the Capitol building is also relevant because Night of the Living Stealers is all about Pennsylvania, the farm field in which first of all, the Night of the Steelers play in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is where the movie was filmed, in the farm field near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is where the plane crashed on 9/11. 9/11, Revelation 9/11, the verse that symbolizes the demonic possession that's coming, that will cause which will be a zombie pandemic. Now, 222 weeks, not only because it symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist, the number 22. Let me just explain that, I guess. So the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist is symbolized by the number 22, or rather is described in the book of Ezekiel, which would have been a Tav mark, the last letter and 22nd letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The mark of the Antichrist is described in the last and 22nd book of the Bible that has a total of the mark of the Antichrist is described in the last book of the Bible, which is the 22nd book out of 22 books in the Bible that have a total of 22 chapters. Also, the mark of the Antichrist alters a person's chromosomes, and chromosomes come in pairs, and each chromosome has 2 arms, so 2 and 2, so 22. But also, Pennsylvania is the second state. And we have this connection from the Night of the Living Stealers, exactly 222 weeks, a zombie pandemic symbolized by the number 22 because of the mark of the Antichrist, but also Pennsylvania. We have the connection from the Night of the Living Stealers Pennsylvania movie, 222 weeks, to the zombie-like crashing of the security perimeter over the protest of the shoplifted stealing, as in Steelers, White House, which is located on Pennsylvania Avenue. Furthermore, the referendum in 2020 was shoplifted in Pennsylvania with its 2 major cities. The second state, 2 major cities, Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. Night of the Living Stealers because the shoplifted referendum in 2020 was stolen in the middle of the night, when the excess pieces of paper were brought in Detroit, in Atlanta, and Philadelphia in the middle of the night. Night of the Living Stealers. On 9/11, the 4 hijackers hijacked the 4th plane 4 minutes before the first plane crashed into the tower next to Wall Street. The 4th plane crash on 9/11 crashed at a 40-degree angle, creating a 40-acre pit in which 44 people died 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The 44th president is the Antichrist, who is predicted to return to the White House at 4x400 Pennsylvania Avenue on January 20th, 2029. His second presidency will be 2 years and 313 days after the predicted crash on Wall Street on the date 313, hence the 2 years and 313 days. Second presidency, date 313. 3 divided by 13 is equal to 0.230. And this is hinting at the number 23, which is Obama's number in high school basketball, which is why he is the basketball president, who, for one thing, built a basketball court next to the White House. The book of Ezra is about a collapsed wall of security, and Ezra 2:13, which since at 2 years and 313 days, identifies Obama as the Antichrist. How is that? Well, this passage, because in the book of Revelation, it says that the number of the Antichrist is 666, and it is to be calculated, and it is the number of a man's name. And it is for those who are wise to understand. Well, if we are wise, we have another 666 in the Bible in Ezra 2:13 that is associated with a man's name, Adonikam. And it so happens that the name Adonikam is equal to 68 in simple English gematria, A equals 1, B equals 2, C equals 3, and so is the name Barack Obama. Adonikam is equal to 408 in English gematria, and so is the name Barack Obama. And so this is how, one way, the second of the two antichrists is identified through the prophecy about the number 666. Incidentally, the title of the first Antichrist on a very important document in the history of Roman Catholicism is Vicarius Filii Dei, the representative of God. Vicarius Filii Dei, the representative of the Son of God, which popes claim to be, which is blasphemy. And anyway, that is it's a Roman title. It's Latin, and Latin Roman letters are also numbers. And when we convert Vicarius Filii Dei to Roman numerals, the sum of the Roman numerals is 666. Okay. Now, so back to what I was saying, though. The book of Ezra is about a wall of security, a collapsed wall of security, and Ezra 2:13 identifies Obama as the Antichrist. 2 years and 313 days is also 2 years, 10 months, and 7 days, which hints at the two planes that crashed next to Wall Street 17 minutes apart. And again, on that same day was the 44 deaths in the pit, 40-acre pit, 40 plus 40 miles outside of Pittsburgh, in a plane hijacked by 4 people, the fourth plane of the day, and it was hijacked 4 minutes before the first plane struck, before the other plane struck 17 minutes later. So what I am doing here is I'm demonstrating how this predicted crash on Wall Street, which is near where the 9/11 events took place, on this 3/13 date, will in turn prophetically connect to the return of the Antichrist, the 44th president, on January 20th, 2029. Okay, and again, not only is it 2 years and 313 days, which I explained how that's relevant, but it's also 2 years, 10 months, and 7 days, which is also very relevant as well. Because again, the two planes crashed next to Wall Street 17 minutes apart. And again, this date is about the predicted crash on Wall Street, which obviously hints at the crashes next to Wall Street, which is why this is relevant. The 2 years, 10 months, and 7 days is relevant from this predicted crash on Wall Street. The predicted crash at the New York Stock Exchange in the financial district in Manhattan on March 13th, 2026, will be 90 plus 100 plus 100% of a calendar year after a car park building collapsed in the financial district next to where the towers collapsed on 9/11. Okay? So this was immediately recognized at the time when this happened. I'll say the date in a second. No, I don't say the date in this paragraph. Okay, well, the date was April 18th, 2023. It was immediately recognized at the time that not only was this a 9/11 sign, because here we have a building that collapsed near Wall Street and near Ground Zero, where the towers collapsed in the financial district, but obviously this was a sign that was pointing to the coming collapse in the financial district on Wall Street, in the stock exchange. That was obvious as soon as I learned of the story. But here we have this astounding connection. Now it all makes sense, finally, because now we can put it together here, because that date, April 18th, 2023, gives us a 9/11 connection to the predicted crash on Wall Street. right next to ground zero where 9/11 happened. But furthermore, through the 9/11 events, God pointed to Wall Street. And I'll play a clip in a second explaining that. Okay? So this, in other words, this crash on Wall Street, like I'm saying, will be pointing to 9/11. I mean, God warned of this through the crash on 9/11 near Wall Street. God actually was warning, pointing to the two pillars of security of America. Its economic power and its military power. But its military power is, of course, rooted in its economic power. But its military power is symbolized by the Pentagon, which is why a plane struck the Pentagon on that day. But the reason why the World Trade Center towers collapsed next to Wall Street is because God was pointing to the pillar of security, which is America's economic strength, which is symbolized by the stock exchange. Okay? So God was warning of the collapse of America's security, its walls of security, which is a parallel with the Bible when the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment on ancient Jericho, which is why it's called Wall Street. It's called Wall Street. In other words, what I'm saying is that the reason why the New York Stock Exchange is on Wall Street is because from the very beginning, God was pointing to the inevitable collapse on Wall Street, which is what is being predicted in this video. Do you understand how important this video is? This prediction, this information from God. It's not from me. Do you understand how important this information is? The name Wall Street is for purposes related to what I'm saying, but specifically also this crash on Wall Street, which will be kicked off on March 13th, as I'm predicting. From the very beginning, Wall Street was named for what I am predicting. The collapse of America's security. The end of America. The end times, not just for America, for the world. But America is God's focus. America is God's Gentile nation. For those who are confused on this subject, America is un-Israel. It is un-Israel. It is a chosen nation. Sometimes people ask me, why are you always so focused on signs in America? And the answer is, because God is. I'm just watching God's signs, and they are all about America. Well, not all. There are, of course, a certain percentage of the signs about Israel. But the two are the same. They're both God's chosen nations. And when there is a sign in an international location, it somehow clearly points to or ties back to America, with very rare exceptions, because part of God's Gentile nation are his Gentile nations, plural, which also includes the other English-speaking countries. But they don't compare in terms of God's signs, nor do they compare, of course, in history to America. Okay. So, now what I'm saying here is that we have this collapse of the financial district car park and a connection with 9/11 to the predicted crash on Wall Street. And again, I'll play a clip. I'll show you how Wall Street was pointed to through the events of 9/11. Now, so let's just continue this paragraph, and then I'll play that clip that I just said I would. The car park was 4 stories high, and at the time, 4 New York City sheriff's cars were in the car park. 4 people went to the hospital. The 4-story car park collapsed at 4 p.m., which happens to be the closing time of the New York Stock Exchange. And that too is symbolic because it's the closing time of the stock market. And actually what's being predicted is in fact a closure of the stock market before the normal closing time of the day. That would require a 20% loss in the Dow on March 13th. Like I said at the beginning, it's not necessary for that to happen, but I'm speculating that that's a possibility. And certainly this closing of the closing time at 4 p.m. could be pointed to here with the 4-story car park with the 4 sheriff's cars and 4 people going to the hospital. In either case, it's definitely hinting at Barack Obama, as I'll explain right here. It is predicted that on 3/13 that the stock market will collapse and close for the day before its usual closing time of 4 p.m. To confirm his signs and connections, God pairs the numbers 23 and 44 together in order to point to the 44th president who wore jersey number 23 in high school basketball. And again, this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And if we think about it, one simple way in which God would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 23 and 44. And I know these are the numbers because I have been studying his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections from morning till night for more than full-time hours for more than 8 years. This is how it works. 23 and 44 are the building blocks, which is why I said earlier, one reason is that the big picture of signs, the true big picture of signs, which is only being explained on this channel, identifies the Antichrist and is built. The building blocks of the big picture of signs is identifying the Antichrist through, for example, pairing 23 and 44. These are, in other words, the building blocks that build the big picture of signs. And all of what I have just said will be proven to be true when this prediction comes to pass. God pairs 23 and 44 together. And I just explained why. The 44th president wore number 23. That's why we have this. Because the date, this is the reason why the collapse of the 4-story car park with 4 sheriff's cars and 4 that went to the hospital at 4 p.m. connects to the predicted collapse of stocks and in the stock exchange on Wall Street on the date 3/13, because 3 divided by 13 is 0.230, which gives us a pairing of 23 and 44. Jesus' official arrival into Jerusalem and first coming was on the 10th day of the first month in the Hebrew calendar. This is 110, and this hints at the number 110. In the book of Joshua, the date on which the Hebrews crossed over the Jordan River and officially entered the Promised Land was also on the 10th day of the first month, which is 110 and hints at the number 110. Jesus' first coming is symbolized by the number 110. This is why on 9/11, the 2 towers that collapsed were each 110 stories high. The collapse of 2 towers that were 110 floors was symbolism for Jesus' second coming. In the book of Joshua in the Bible, Joshua died at the age of 110. Joshua led the Hebrews around the security walls of the ancient city of Jericho before they collapsed in judgment. On 9/11, the twin towers, which were 110 stories high, collapsed, engendering a small earthquake that cracked the foundation of Federal Hall, where George Washington was inaugurated, on Wall Street. President George Washington was a founding father, and his inauguration as the first president was a symbolic founding of the nation. The cracking of the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street on 9/11 symbolized America's foundation in God being cracked. This is because after Washington's inauguration at Federal Hall, he then walked down Wall Street to Trinity Chapel, where he consecrated the nation to God, saying that if the nation were to ever turn away from God, it would lose its blessings. After 9/11, Trinity Chapel was called the Miracle Chapel, as it was the only building at Ground Zero to have survived. It did not even suffer a broken window due to the 70-year-old sycamore tree that was uprooted as it sheltered the chapel from the falling debris. In commemoration of this sycamore tree outside the chapel, today there is a huge bronze statue of its roots. In other words, through the 9/11 events, God was pointing to Trinity Chapel and Washington's covenantal consecration of the nation to God at Trinity Chapel. Wall Street is named after the original 9-foot-high wall of security that the Dutch built to keep the British and the Indians out. The collapse of 110 floors that cracked the foundation of Federal Hall on Wall Street, which is named after a 9-foot-high security wall, hints at 9/11 and points to Joshua, who died at 110, and the Hebrews that marched around the walls of security before they collapsed in judgment. 110 floors and the 9-foot-high wall of security that was Wall Street points to George Washington's march down Wall Street to Trinity Chapel that symbolized a covenantal relationship between America and God. To this effect, Washington's march down Wall Street with the New York Stock Exchange, the building that symbolizes America's financial strength, located on one side of the street, and Federal Hall, the building that symbolizes America's governmental and institutional strength on the other side, also pointed to the cutting rights ritual practiced in ancient Israel that was used in Abraham's and God's ritual walk in their covenant that is described in Genesis 15. A covenant that symbolizes Washington's walk down Wall Street and his covenantal consecration of the nation to God at Trinity Chapel. There are only two nations in the history of the world that were founded not on ethnicity or territory or language, but were founded solely for God: Israel and America. In every daily Bible that is divided into 365 readings, a portion of the Bible for each day of the year, on every September 11th, everyone that reads this standard 365-day Bible reads the passage in the book of Isaiah, chapter 9, verse 11, which is the judgment warning on ancient Israel, which was a raid on ancient Israel by the world's first recorded terrorists, the ancient Assyrians. And the terrorists on 9/11 were from the same part of the world. The Assyrians raided the northern kingdom of Israel first, and then later the southern kingdom of Judah was destroyed, which is why the terrorists on 9/11 hit the North Tower first, followed 17 minutes later by the South Tower. And this Isaiah 9:11 passage includes a mention of collapsed buildings and uprooted sycamore trees. On the morning after 9/11, Senate Majority Leader Tom Daschle gave a speech to the world regarding the events on 9/11. He quoted the passage in Isaiah 9:11, not realizing it was a judgment warning on the ancient Jews. He quoted how, after the raid by the Assyrians, the Hebrews did not repent to God, but instead vowed defiantly to rebuild and become stronger than before. And so, like the ancient Jews, America did not repent after the judgment warning, and instead defied God even more. And so, like ancient Israel, America will now be destroyed. This is why, in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, he frequently pairs together the number 110 and the number 9. Both of these numbers symbolize God's judgment on the nation, and paired together, these numbers point to the big judgment warning that was 9/11. As well, these numbers paired together in God's signs and connections serve as a witness confirmation that the perceived signs and connections are from God. After the judgment warning of 9/11, America was given a period of grace to repent and turn back to God, or else judgment destruction. In the Bible, a 20-year period symbolizes a complete period of waiting. Jacob waited 20 years to get possession of his wives and property, the children of Israel waited 20 years to be freed of Jabin, the king of Canaan, when they were freed from bondage by Deborah and Barak. The Ark of the Covenant waited 20 years in Kiriath Jearim, and Solomon spent 20 years building his home and the house of God. On the 20th anniversary of the buildings that collapsed on 9/11 was the sudden collapse of America's presence in Afghanistan, and the iconic scene of this was the U.S. Air Force plane leaving the airport in Afghanistan, and the big number on the side of its plane is 1109, which hints at 110 and 9. The predicted crash on Wall Street on March 13th, 2026 will be 109 days after the death of the 111-year-old The predicted crash on Wall Street on March 13th, 2026 will be 109 days after the death at the age of 111 of the oldest survivor of the Black Wall Street Massacre. The Black Wall Street Massacre. And this death occurred on November 24th, 2025. Now, what I'm referring to here is the what's also called the Tulsa Massacre. But the other name for it, another nickname for it, is the Black Wall Street Massacre. Because Tulsa at the time was a prosperous, or rather in Tulsa at the time was a neighborhood that was prosperous for African Americans, Black Americans. That's why it was nicknamed Black Wall Street. It was like a, anyway. But what happened was there was a race riot, and I forget the date, and it's not really important. It was, in the early 20th century. But the point is that we have, at the age of 111, one of the survivors, the oldest of them, died. And of course, Black Wall Street hints at Wall Street. And we're talking about a crash, and that is a similar theme to a massacre, if you will. Okay? Now, from the death, in other words, what I'm saying is that his death at the age of 111 is a prophetic sign, and it connects with 109 days to the predicted crash on Wall Street. That's a 9/11 sign. That makes this 109 days and 111 years old, hints at the crashes on 9/11 next to Wall Street. Also, 109 is also the 9 plus 10 plus 10th prime number, which is another 9/11. So if you thought that was a stretch for some reason, because I don't, well, this is a second witness confirmation, because 109 is also hinting at 9/11. The death of the oldest survivor of the Black Wall Street Massacre on November 24th was exactly the 191st prime number of months after the crash on Wall Street on October 24th, 1929, known as Black Thursday. Black Thursday was the kickoff event, the Black Swan financial event, the unexpected, sudden, initial crash of the 1929 stock market crash, which to this date, I'm pretty sure was the biggest crash in history. I could be wrong. There might have been a crash back in the like 1700s or something that was bigger. I'm not sure. But the point is that this is huge, because what's being predicted for this Friday is a Black Friday. And like Black Thursday, will be the initial kickoff to the biggest crash in history. Which is why this all connects through Black Wall Street. And again, this 191st prime number of months obviously hints at 9/11. By the way, that's 1,153 months if I remember correctly. Okay, so from Black Thursday, we have a 9/11 connection to the death of the oldest survivor of the Black Wall Street massacre, and that in turn connects with two 9/11 connections to the predicted crash on Wall Street, Black Friday, a Black Swan Black Friday event that's being predicted. Amazing. It is predicted that on March 13th, 2026, there will be a Black Swan event in the stock market. One of the best examples in history of a Black Swan event in the stock market was Black Monday in October of 1987, when the Dow index lost a record 23% in one day. God pairs 9, 23, and 44 together to confirm his signs, patterns, and connections. This is because the 44th president, who was inaugurated in 2009, wore jersey number 23 in high school basketball. Okay, again, these are the building blocks of God's signs. These are the building blocks of God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. His true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, which works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And if we think about it, one simple way in which God would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 9, 23, and 44. And I know these are the numbers because I have been studying his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections from morning till night for more than full-time hours for more than 8 years. That said, I recognize that these are the building blocks. The pairing of 9, 23, and 44 is the building blocks of God's signs 6, 7 years ago, near the beginning of all of this. So, okay, so what we have here is, I'm getting this out of the way here. What we have so far here is the Dow losing 23% in one day, which was a record, and God uses records for signs. Okay, this was a record 23% loss in one day. This is still to date the largest percentage of loss in one day, and will always be the case because now they have the circuit breaker where if the Dow loses 20%, the market closes. Oh, I take that back. It could theoretically surpass 23% because the circuit breaker doesn't get triggered if the 20% level of loss is reached within the last half hour or so of the trading day. Okay. Now, the predicted crash on the date 3/13, which hints at 23, because 3 divided by 13 is 0.230, will be 440.00%. In other words, this is an exact number, and it gives us 44. Of a calendar year after the crash of an MD-87 plane owned by a company named 987 Investments LLC on the anniversary of the Black Monday crash in 1987. And if you didn't get that, the MD McDonnell Douglas 87 model plane owned by 987 Investments hints at the year 1987. The chartered plane that crashed had 6 plus 6 plus 6 people on board, and which hints at 666, and it crashed in the 4th biggest city in the US when it was on its way to a Major League Baseball playoff game number 4 that was in the 2 times 3rd state, which hints at 23. The 4th biggest city, and game 4 hints at 44, and the 23rd 2 times third state hints at 23, a pairing of 23 and 44. Which, as I just said, also connects with 440% to the date that hints at 23. And a predicted crash, which is why the connection from this plane crash. The plane crash was in Harris County, and the predicted plane crash that will make Obama the president again will involve the death of Kamala Harris. But that's another subject. This crash of the MD-87, owned by 987 Investments LLC, occurred on the 34th anniversary of the Black Monday crash in 1987, 1987. At the time of the plane crashes on 9/11, the Dow was closed at 9,605.51 points, a 0.34 point difference from the prior close at 9,605.85 points. $9,605, incidentally, hints at 9 and 6 plus 5 and 11, which hints at 9/11. And that was the number that the Dow was frozen at throughout the day of 9/11. Anyway, that day, which was the closing from the prior day, from the Monday, when it was closed at 9,650.51, that Monday close was 0.34 points difference from the close on the prior Friday, which gives us the number 34. 34 is relevant to 9/11 because it's 2 times 17, and 2 planes struck the towers 17 minutes apart. Well, this crash of the plane that pointed to the crash in 1987, clearly, was on the 34th anniversary of the 1987 crash. I mean, that's amazing. I mean, how could anyone not see this? How could even a secular person not have noticed this? A materialist, no, of course not. They wouldn't be looking at it, but it's so clear, right? When you just look at it, MD-87, 987 Investments LLC, on the anniversary of the 1987 crash, well, obviously, it was a crash sign, right? Now, the thing is, the 34th anniversary, this crash on the 34th anniversary of the 1987 crash, 34 because it is the 9th Fibonacci number. Fibonacci numbers aren't just a mathematical trivial thing. They are found, the Fibonacci sequence is found throughout the natural world. It's a creation sequence of numbers. And the number 9 is the most important number, as from the Bible it symbolizes God's judgment. So, now, which is why the 9th Fibonacci number of years. After the 87 crash, we get the crash involving the 987 Investments LLC MD-87 plane. Now, that game 4 on the 9th Fibonacci number of years anniversary of Black Monday was known for the 4th prime number of runs the team from the 4th biggest city scored in the 9th inning, when the game was tied at 2-2. 2 plus 2 equals 4. This famous 9th inning on the 9th Fibonacci anniversary of the 23% stock market loss, when the team from the 4th biggest city scored the 4th prime number of runs in the 2 times third state, pairs the numbers 9, 23, and 44, and this confirms the signs and connections. And again, it's 444% of a year to the crash, predicted crash on 3/13, which gives us the number 23. So you see over and over again here, this pattern of 9, 23, and 44, right? The 9th Fibonacci anniversary, the game was known for the 9th inning, but it was the team from the fourth biggest city and they scored the fourth prime number of runs, which incidentally is 7 runs. And it was game 4, right? So that's 9 and 44 there, but it was in the 2 times third state. And the connection is to the date 313 with 440% of a year. All right. In Strong's Hebrew Bible Concordance, H 226, the 226th word in the concordance, is the word that means prophetic sign. On Black Monday in 1987, the Dow lost 22.6%, which obviously hints at H226, making this a prophetic sign. On the anniversary of the 1987 stock market crash of 22.6%, an MD87 owned by 987 Investments LLC crashed while on its way from the fourth biggest city to game number 4. This anniversary of the 22.6% loss was exactly 226 weeks before the 4th deadliest avalanche in U.S. history, when snow crashed from a mountain peak, as in stocks crashing from a high peak. 8 people were reported killed in the avalanche that was near where Interstate 80 was closed at Donner Pass due to snow. Now, there's a lot of prophetic significance to this Donner Pass connection, which I explain in the Donner Pass video. Make sure you watch that other video. I'm only scratching the surface of what's going on here. Now, okay, so 8 people died in the avalanche near where the Interstate 80 was closed at the Donner Pass due to snow. Just like the avalanche killed the people with snow. The skiing expedition was led by 4 guides. The snow suddenly crashed onto skiers led by 4 guides near the closed interstate highway on the same day that 4 people died in car crashes in a car pileup on the interstate highway in Colorado due to a sudden, quote unquote, brownout when soil was whipped up and blown over the interstate, making visibility not possible, causing the car pileup. The cars were northbound towards Denver, Colorado, and on this same day, the 80s coach of the Denver Nuggets died. The 4th deadliest avalanche and the 4 deaths in the crashes in Colorado were exactly 400 and plus 400. The 4th deadliest avalanche and the 4 deaths in crashes in Colorado were exactly 444 plus 444 plus 444 days after the Colorado Avalanche won the Stanley Cup. And God repeats the number 3 times for emphasis of its symbolic meaning. The 80s coach died on the same day of the death of the first serious black presidential candidate who ran for president in the 80s. Jesse Jackson was the founder of the Rainbow Coalition, and he died on the date 2/17, which is the date that the sudden and unexpected flood judgment began in the Bible, and the symbol of this judgment is a rainbow. The Rainbow Coalition guy died on the date 217, which is astounding because it hints at the rainbow. A black swan event is a sudden and unexpected event. The first black presidential candidate's run for president was a black swan event in American politics. Jesse Jackson's death was on the same day as the unexpected, sudden, deadly avalanche and sudden, deadly car crashes in a sudden brownout, in a sudden, unexpected brownout. The black swan candidacy of the first black presidential candidate was in 1984. He paved the way for the first black president, who was born on the date 8/4. And the name Obama is equal to 84 in Hebrew gematria. The 80s coach of the Colorado team died when 4 people died in the car crashes on the interstate in Colorado. This hints at the number 84, right? 80s coach, 4 deaths, Colorado. This was the same day that the Interstate 80 was closed near where 8 people died in the skiing expedition led by 4 guides, and it was the 4th deadliest avalanche. This, too, hints at the number 84, right? Interstate 80, 8 deaths, 4 guides, 4th deadliest avalanche, 84. The death of the 84 black swan candidate and these black swan disasters on the date 217 hinted at the number 84 and the sudden and unexpected black swan event that is predicted to be a plane crash that will lead to the sudden and unexpected black swan return of the first black president to the White House. The death of the 84 black swan candidate, the black swan fall of snow that killed 8 people in the 4th deadliest avalanche, the death of the 80s coach for Colorado, and the 4 deaths in the car pileup in Colorado were 4 days after the sudden and unexpected fall and crash of the heavily favored to win figure skater dressed like a black swan, nicknamed Quad God, as in quad being 4, who is the 4-time U.S. national champion. As a result of his shocking and unexpected black swan collapse, he finished in 8th place, which also hinted at 84, right? 4-time champion, finished in 8th place, nicknamed Quad God, right? The black swan skater finished in 8th place after his shocking and unexpected crash, and he was the last of the 8+8+8 skaters to skate in the event. The death of the 80s coach, the death of the Black Swan 80s candidate, the closure of the I-80, and the death of 8 skiers in the Black Swan avalanche on the date 217 is 8+8+8 days before the predicted Black Swan stock market crash on March 13th. Also, this date 217, like I said, hints at the flood judgment, which began on the date 217, the unexpected sudden flood. And from the flood judgment, 8 people were rescued in the ark. All right? And that's why from this flood date, we have, which was the day of the death of the 80s coach, the death of the Black Swan 80s candidate, the closure of the I-80, and the death sudden unexpected death of 8 skiers in the Black Swan avalanche on the date 217, which hints at the 8 people that were rescued in the flood, is 8 plus 8 plus 8 days before the predicted Black Swan stock market crash, sudden unexpected crash on March 13th. And March 13th will be 2 years, 10 months, and 7 days, which hints at the date 217, before the predicted Black Swan return of the first black president on January 20th, 2029. 2 years, 10 months, and 7 days hints at the date of the sudden and unexpected date of the flood in the Bible on the date 217. It also hints at 9/11 when the sudden, unexpected 2 planes crashed 17 minutes apart into the 2 towers. The sudden and unexpected Black Swan return of the first black president will be the result of a predicted sudden and unexpected Black Swan plane crash, as in the 9/11 sudden unexpected plane crashes, that will be due to a bird strike, another hint at Black Swan, in the 8 plus 8 plus 8th state, which is more confirmation of the 8 plus 8 plus 8 days to the crash on Wall Street, which is where 9/11 happened, where the planes crashed, 2 of them 17 minutes apart. The predicted sudden and unexpected Black Swan return of the 44th president is why the skiing expedition was led by 4 guides when the Black Swan 4th deadliest avalanche occurred on the same day that 4 people died in the Black Swan brownout car pileup. Again, the skiing expedition led by 4 guides in the 4th deadliest avalanche and the death of 4 people in the car pileup was 440.00% of a year after the plane crash in the 4th biggest city, the plane that was on its way to Game 4 on the anniversary of the Black Swan Black Monday stock market crash. This is merely scratching the surface of the reasons for how this prediction is known in advance. For more information, please visit Odyssey, spelled ODYSEE.com, or Rumble.com video channels named Asteroid Prediction. And also read the website TrumpPrediction.com. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or 2 that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more. Don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, my flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the odyssey.com or rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.